The film kicks off in France, where we meet Frank, a guy whose job is making sure giant skyscrapers don't collapse. Not exactly a boring 9 to 5, but he's clearly used to hanging off steel beams all day. The very next morning, Frank tags along with his wife Leo to the hospital. She's heavily pregnant, 8 months in, and the doctor tells him the due date is just around the corner. The couple, happy but a little nervous, drive home after the appointment, only to walk into a nightmare. Their place looks like it's been ripped apart. Furniture flipped, drawers emptied, everything turned upside down. It's obvious someone broke in and wasn't just there to steal a TV. They were hunting for something specific. Later, Frank vents to his best friend, Ben, about the mess. Ben, calm as always, points out that whoever trashed the apartment probably wanted a key Frank had been keeping under wraps. Frank doesn't explain much more, but the audience can tell this key is no ordinary house key. Days pass, and while Frank is at work inspecting another high-rise, he almost takes a deadly fall. Just then, he notices a bald man climbing down the scaffolding like he's running from something. Without thinking, Frank gives chase, but the guy bolts and slips away. Shaken, Frank hurries home, worried because Leo hasn't answered his calls all day. Relief floods him when he finds her safe. But elsewhere, that bald fugitive climbs into a car with a mysterious older man sporting white hair. Within minutes, the old man casually kills him, as if disposing of pawns is part of his daily routine. That same night, once Leo has dozed off, Frank sneaks up to the roof of their building. He's checking on the very key everyone seems to want. The audience still doesn't know what it opens or why it's valuable, but Frank's paranoia tells us it's dangerous in the wrong hands. He hides it inside a sink, hoping the spot is safer, but Leo unexpectedly shows up. She's fed up, demanding to know why he's been acting distant and why he spends nights away from her side. Just as Frank struggles to explain, a loud knock echoes at the door. Before they can react, masked intruders storm inside. Frank and Leo fight tooth and nail, proving they're not an ordinary couple. But sheer numbers eventually overpower them. The attackers restrain Frank, pressing a gun to his hand to force his fingerprints onto a phone. The white-haired man, the one who killed his own henchman earlier, reveals himself as the ringleader. His name is Van Nokken, a ruthless mercenary. His orders? Get that key, no matter the cost. When Frank refuses, Van Nokken hacks into his phone, knocks him unconscious, and has Leo sedated before whisking her away. The story suddenly rewinds a decade earlier. We're shown a graduating batch of Gaigan, an elite police force. Young Frank is there, standing tall among the recruits. He isn't with Leo yet, but she's in the picture too, another fresh graduate. Nico, another classmate, introduces his wife, Manon. Their commanding officer, Astro, congratulates Frank personally and hands him a badge once carried by Frank's father. Engraved on the back are the words ad vitam, meaning for life. The heirloom clearly matters to Frank. 2 years later, new recruits are being tested. Ben, still not the most social guy, steps up for the final exam. He nails a perfect shot straight into the bullseye on a target strapped to his senior officer's chest, earning him the year's top graduate title. At the graduation party, Leo takes notice of Ben's struggles fitting in. She sympathizes, maybe because of his immigrant background. Frank, however, is distracted. He can't ignore his own feelings for her. Worried Ben might win her over, Frank blurts out his affection. To his shock, Leo admits she's felt the same way for 2 years. Their chemistry peaks in a romantic moment inside a bathroom, only to be interrupted when Ben, completely drunk, stumbles in and nearly vomits. Later that night, while walking home, Nico teases Frank about whether he and Leo will finally be a couple. That marks the official start of their relationship, with Ben, Nico, and Manon happily accepting them as a group. A week later, routine training gets cut short when Frank receives a frantic call from Eric, a hotel staffer. He claims to have heard gunshots inside one of the rooms. Frank rushes there with Nico and Ben. Instead of backup, they find armed suspects waiting. Chaos erupts. Gunfire leaves Nico critically wounded while Ben also takes a hit. Frank manages to subdue the shooters, but Nico dies in his arms. The following day, Astro berates Frank for charging in without orders, which cost Nico his life and injured another officer. With no choice, he asks Frank to step down. Heartbroken, Frank collects his belongings, staring one last time at his father's photo on the wall. After Nico's funeral, Frank notices Leo speaking with Astro. Grief-stricken from Nico's death, she decides to quit the unit as well. Frank later visits Ben, who is recovering but left with permanent injuries. While there, they stumble upon a social media post suggesting the hotel gunmen were ex-special forces. The claim is brushed off as rumor, but Frank can't let it go. Ben warns him to stay out of it, especially since he himself has been forced into an administrative desk job because of his wounds. Eventually, he resigns too, his career cut short. For Frank, the guilt only deepens. One evening over dinner, Leo shares big news. She's pregnant. They both want to give the baby a good life, so they move into a bigger apartment. While packing, Frank finds his old badge, still smeared with dry blood from the hotel shooting years ago. His curiosity reignites. He quietly asks a police forensic friend to test the DNA. Results confirm one of the attackers was a former Special Forces soldier named Salim. Salim isn't some random rogue. He has ties to the Directorate of Security and works closely with government ministries. Suddenly, the random tourist killed at that hotel years back doesn't look so random. Frank realizes the incident may have been bigger than anyone admitted, and whatever secrets tied back to that bloody night are still following him. Ben kept reminding Frank to stay out of the mess, but Frank wasn't the type to let things go. Even so, for a while he listened. He stuffed away everything he dug up on Salim inside a locker and hid the little key up on the roof of his apartment building. That was the big secret all along. The rooftop key wasn't for some treasure chest, but for a locker packed with evidence from the bloody hotel case years back. Time moved on, but Frank's obsession didn't. He couldn't shake the feeling that the truth behind the trainee and hotel shooting was still buried somewhere. Eventually, curiosity got the better of him, and he contacted a journalist. Frank demanded anonymity, but agreed to hand over the files he had collected. At the same time, over at the ministry, the director of security sat with the minister herself, discussing a dangerous complication. They revealed that just 7 months earlier, an American colonel named John Brennan, once a soldier, now a CIA officer, had landed in France. His mission? To smooth over a massive weapons deal with Australia. Things went sideways when Brennan's guards caught Salim snooping around his hotel room. Gunfire erupted, killing people who weren't supposed to die. Now, with Frank still holding stained evidence tying Salim to the crime, the directorate had a nightmare on their hands. If this proof ever made it to Washington, relations between France and the U.S. would collapse overnight. The minister made herself clear. Frank had to be silenced permanently and the incriminating evidence retrieved. Back in the present, Frank regained consciousness after being beaten down, only to hear his phone ring. On the line was Van Nokken. The mercenary casually explained that Leo was alive, but barely, and if Frank wanted her to stay that way, he had 4 hours to deliver the proof. Going to the police would be pointless. Van Nokken had already set him up as a fugitive, planting his fingerprints on weapons, so it looked like Frank murdered those thugs himself. With the net tightening, Frank rushed home to grab the sink key, but when he arrived, cops were already crawling all over his apartment. He checked the hiding spot. Empty. Someone had beaten him to it. Cornered by an officer, Frank fought his way free and bolted before they could cuff him. Desperate, he found Ben and explained everything. When Frank admitted the locker key was gone, Ben realized their only shot was to use the blood-stained Gigan badge. He handed over his own badge, and Frank smeared his blood on it to make it look authentic. Their plan was simple. Fool Van Nokken into thinking he had what he wanted, then use that as leverage to free Leo. Together, they drove deep into the woods for the handoff. But Ben, ever cautious, hung back before the meeting point and secretly planted a tracker on Frank. Frank walked straight into Van Nokken's lair and was immediately chained up. Face to face with the mercenary, he was dragged to Leo, who was bound and terrified. Van Nokken seized Frank's phone and forced a message out to his contacts, staged to look like Frank had murdered Leo before doing something even worse. What Van Nokken didn't realize was that the GPS on the phone also pinged police headquarters. Satisfied with his manipulation, Van Nokken left his men behind to finish the job. Just when things looked hopeless, a masked figure burst in Ben. He took out the guards and freed the couple. They snatched a car and tore off into the night, but Van Nokken's forces weren't far behind. Gunshots shattered the silence as the chase exploded through the forest roads. In the chaos, a bullet ripped through Leo's arm, badly injuring her. Frank tried to stop the bleeding, but another crisis hit. Leo's water broke. Labor had started right in the middle of the firefight. Realizing time was critical, Frank shouted at Ben to get Leo to a hospital while he stayed behind to slow their pursuers. He leapt out of the moving car and faced down Van Nokken's men alone. A furious battle followed. Frank stole a ranger's dirt bike to try and outrun them, but Van Nokken was relentless, chasing him through the woods. Meanwhile, in the car, Ben struggled to keep Leo conscious as her face went pale. She was slipping away fast. Then, just when things couldn't get worse, the police also closed in, convinced Frank was their fugitive target. In a bold gamble, Frank ditched the bike, hijacked a farmer's power motor, and took off into the sky. Hovering above the treetops, he called Ben, begging for an update. Leo was fading in and out, and Ben himself was bleeding badly from his own wounds. At police headquarters, Astro, Frank's old boss, was ordered to stop his former subordinate at any cost. He deployed a unit to intercept them. Ben, pushing through his injuries, finally pulled into the hospital parking lot. Van Nokken was right there waiting, gun in hand. Just as he prepared to finish the job, Frank swooped in, dropping down from above. But before he could kill the mercenary, Astro's squad surrounded the scene. Despite the danger, Frank rushed to scoop up Leo and carry her inside for help. Doctors and medics immediately took over, fighting to save both mother and child. Outside, Astro arrested Frank on the spot. The charges were heavy: murder, conspiracy, resisting arrest. Everything pointed against him. Weeks passed. Then, 1 month later, Frank sat inside prison, broken but alive. The visiting room door opened, and there was Leo, weak but smiling, holding their newborn baby in her arms. The reunion was emotional. Through tears, Leo explained she had found the missing locker key during the final battle. She had already passed the files to the authorities, who confirmed everything Frank had said. With that, the court cleared him of all charges, ruling that he acted only in self-defense and was not guilty of killing Van Nokken's mercenaries. The film's final scene showed Frank embracing Leo and their child, relief and love written across their faces. A few steps away, Ben, still bruised but alive, watched quietly. He smiled, content to see his friends safe at last, knowing their suffering hadn't been for nothing. The credits rolled. The nightmare ended, but the scars of betrayal, loss, and survival remained carved into their lives forever.